We have all the practice reports, so let's go out there and let's get these rankings updated for week 10, ladies and gentlemen. Not going to waste your time with the first tier. Obviously, we already all know to start CMC, Chase, Diggs, St. Brown, Eckler, Lamb, ETN. Really, the only thing that may be worth talking about with these tier 1 players will be that Jamar Chase did not practice on Wednesday. He did get in a limited practice on Thursday with the back injury. This is going to be something that we need to continue to monitor going through the weekend. But with T. Higgins already being ruled out this week, I am operating under the assumption that Jamar Chase will play. And yes, I think even if Chase is dealing with a little bit of a sore back, I think he will be fine. I think he will be someone they need to go through and start. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we will go Keenan Allen. Now, Keenan Allen last week in a game against a brutal defense went out there and had 50% of the passing yardage in Los Angeles. You have no Joshua Palmer. You have no Mike Williams. Quentin Johnston has done nothing. Plus, this game is the highest over-under of any game in the NFL this week, leading to Keenan Allen going out there most likely just completely smashing. Now, going across the pond, we are going to be looking at Jonathan Taylor taking on the Patriots. With JT, this over-under is actually pretty high, higher than you would assume. He's averaged about 13.1 fantasy points per game so far this season. Obviously, the number is very skewed based off the usage of Zach Moss early on in the year. But if you look at Jonathan Taylor's usage trend over the past 4 weeks, he's just taking more and more and more. Jonathan Taylor is someone we drafted a lot of. Very excited to see him continue to produce. Now, we will be going with Alvin Kamara and Tony Pollard here at 10 and 11. If you were playing in a non-PPR format, Pollard would actually be much higher than this. If you were looking at the underdog pick'ems that you have this week, you currently have Tony Pollard at even odds to score a touchdown against the Giants, despite the fact that I believe Pollard hasn't scored a touchdown since he played the Giants. And with Tony Pollard, he's at about, I want to say, 92.5 total yards. So your expectations sky high with Tony Pollard. Obviously, beautiful matchup, great buy low candidate, but ultimately he's averaging 13.5 points per game so far this season. Alvin Kamara is up there at about 21. I want to reiterate, like we said 2 weeks ago when Alvin Kamara was at the very top, we probably wanted to go through and look to sell him if you were playing in a non-PPR format. In a full PPR league, however, you just have so much production with Kamara. We kind of have to have him here. Now, Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs will be our next two backs. If we were looking at the pick'ems on Underdog, right now Josh Jacobs is more than less than 91.5 total yards. Joe Mixon is more than less than 94.5 total yards. What I'm going to be very interested to see is, does Josh Jacobs see more target volume this week than he did a week ago? That's going to be the main concern that we have. And that if you go back and look at what we had this past week with Josh Jacobs, he did have 0 targets. I don't necessarily know if O'Connell's going to look to check the ball down less than Jimmy G did. It will be something for us to continue to monitor. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we will have Bree Hall. Obviously, with Bree Hall, great running back, great workload. The issue is this is someone that just is in a horrendous offense. His underdog pick'em is at 86.5 total yards. This is lower than both what you have with Josh Jacobs as well as Joe Mixon. And I would say Bree Hall is also less likely to score a touchdown given the fact that he is stuck in this Jets offense. Now, Chris Olave will be that next guy. With Olave, he's a buy low guy for us earlier on, keeping it stupid simple. If you are a young, proven talent at the wide receiver position and you are averaging 10 targets per game, you are someone I want to rely upon. You are someone I want to bet on. Even if the offense is very bad, I mean, Olave is a great player and he's getting consistent volume. Now, DK Metcalf will be that next guy at 16. If you're looking at DK Metcalf, not a super big fan. I mean, Jackson Smith-Njigba going to expand his role. We were talking about selling DK Metcalf high earlier in the season. However, if you are looking at what we have for this week in particular, it is a phenomenal matchup this week going up against Washington. So I think you can take him here. We'll go Michael Pittman at 17 with Pittman. I want to continue to monitor Josh Downs. Looks like Downs may be missing this week. If Downs plays, you can maybe move Pittman to the bottom of this tier. If Downs misses, you can maybe move Pittman ahead of Olave and Metcalf. Aaron Jones will be that next guy at 18. Aaron Jones going up against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's actually allowed a decent amount of points to opposing running backs so far this year. Now, if you are looking at what we've had so far this season when it comes to Aaron Jones in particular, obviously the points per game numbers are going to be disgusting. but that's because he got hurt. If you look at the usage, it is going in the right direction where it does look like they're going to be using him more and more. Derrick Henry will be that next running back at 19. With Derrick Henry, it's a pick'em game against Tampa. It is a pretty tough matchup overall. Not as tough of a matchup, though, as what Saquon Barkley is dealing with. With Saquon Barkley, you currently have him as a 16-point dog. Yes, a 16-point dog going up against this Dallas Cowboys defense, where you have the New York Giants with an applied team total of about 11 not fantasy points, real life NFL points. So while I agree with you, Saquon Barkley is 100% of this Giants offense. It is the worst offense in the NFL and not even remotely close right now. If we knew this was going to be the case, I would not have drafted nearly as much of him as I did. Now, of course, sadly, I did not know that. So sadly, I have a lot of Saquon Barkley. Now, jumping down to our next tier, we're going to go with Gibbs and David Montgomery. Yes, we're ranking both running backs here. Pretty much a statement ranking. We're probably a little bit too high on these guys, but I essentially just want to say you need to start both. Okay, they're running behind an elite offensive line. Gibbs will be the guy that we're a little bit more excited about in a full PPR format. However, if you are looking at what we have in a non-PPR league, then you'd be going with Montgomery. Kenneth Walker's been horrendous, but Kenneth Walker also just played the Cleveland Browns, where he was banged up in that game, and then he had to go up against the Baltimore Ravens. This week should be a much, much easier game going up against Washington, where we just saw that you actually had a fine week overall from Ramondre Stevenson. So if Ramondre can get there, if the Patriots offense can get there, I think that probably we should be confident that Seattle can as well. Now, Brandon Aiyuk will be the next guy at 24. With Aiyuk, I think we have to go through and lower expectations just a little bit compared to where he's been so far this season. But primarily, this is just due to the fact that we have Deebo Samuel coming back, right? We'll talk about Deebo a little bit later on, but it looks like Deebo Samuel's 100% good to go in this game. And then looking at Garrett Wilson here at 25, this is a wide receiver that's, if he had Aaron Rodgers, we could be significantly more excited. If you're looking at his underdog pick'em, he's at 66.5 receiving yards. Brandon Aiyuk at 64.5. So maybe make the argument, well, Mason Wilson projects to be a better option than Aiyuk. My issue is, if you look at the implied team total, only 18.5 points for the Jets. So it is a very tough spot to bet on this offense. And of course, if you want to go check out those pick'ems on Underdog, you can actually get a special Garrett Wilson pick'em more than less than half a total yard. If you are new to Underdog Fantasy with promo code FLOCK, Flock is also going to get you a 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, you can hop in some drafts with us on the live stream that we're doing pretty much every night at this point. Now, going over to our next player, we are going to be looking at Bijan Robinson. Bijan's been very bad. He's averaging 12.5 points per game. Now, obviously, a lot of this is skewed based off that one game that he had with the headache. If we remove that headache game where he just wasn't used at all, there Bijan Robinson is actually closer to about 13.5 points per game. Nonetheless, he is still seeing double-digit carries every single week. He is still having 4 to 5 targets per game. The question is, can he finally get some usage in the red zone? I am setting up a prayer that he does. Of course, you know, this is my guy, Hoka Morris. We interviewed him at the draft. I ran into him at the gym in Austin. Coolest guy ever, really rooting for him. Now, our next guy will be Devonte Adams at 27. If you are looking at Devonte Adams, this is a wide receiver that has a brutal matchup going up against the Jets. We have an implied team total of 17.5 points here if you are looking at this Raiders offense. So I don't necessarily want to be super excited. And also, you have to consider the fact that this Jets defense is obviously a better passing defense than they are rushing defense. Devonte Adams actually has a pick'em on Underdog right now of 54.5 total yards. So to be honest with you, this ranking may still be too aggressive, because if we go over and look at other guys in this next tier, you have Mike Evans significantly higher than this. You have Chris Godwin at 58 receiving yards. I mean, you have Deontay Johnson up there at 62.5. So if you are looking at this, honestly, maybe Devonte Adams should be below these 3 wide receivers. And if you wanted to make that argument, I am not going to fault you at all. Now, with that being said, our next guy, Rashad White, in here at 31, is in an interesting spot in that with Rashad White coming off multiple rushing touchdowns, this is a player that I want to reiterate what we've said all season. He's in a bad offense, has a cap ceiling, but you like him in a full PPR format because in a full PPR league, this is a running back that's going to consistently see 4 to 5 targets out of this backfield. So if you have that kind of reception floor, you should be someone that we are at least starting every week. Now, Terry McLaurin will be our next wide receiver at 32. One of these days, I will throw in the towel and I'll just admit, okay, I guess if Sam Howell is 2019 Jameis Winston, then that means Terry McLaurin is 2019 Chris Godwin, 2019 Mike Evans. Honestly, looking at this, we're probably too low on Terry McLaurin. His pick'em's at 63.5 receiving yards, which is right in line with what you have with like Deontay, Godwin, Evans. But again, like we said, higher than what you have with Devonte Adams. Now, Deebo Samuel will be the next guy. Deebo Samuel has gotten in full practices pretty much every single day this week. Deebo's playing in an offense where you have a lot of touchdown upside overall as well. Now, keep in mind, you do have a low floor because he is coming off an injury. And at the same time, you have so many weapons in San Fran. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we are going to go with Ramondre Stevenson. And with Ramondre Stevenson here, very similar setup to Rashad White. I kind of think that they're the same running back in that neither of them are good offenses. Both of them have been very inefficient so far this season, but both of them remain players that you have to start every single week in a full PPR league because they are going to catch the ball. Now, the difference between Ramondre and Rashad White, and why we'll have White in the tier above, is because in the case of Rashad White, you're not really competing with anybody. Whereas in the case of Ramondre Stevenson, Ezekiel Elliott also has a pretty large workload here. So I think maybe that's a strong reason. Now, Jordan Addison will be our next player at 35. Addison will be significantly lower than this if Justin Jefferson were to play. Jefferson's been practicing every single day this week. And to be honest with you, I think if Cousins was the quarterback here and it looked like this team still had big time aspirations, I think that Justin Jefferson would rush himself back. But I mean, reports are coming out saying he's probably not going to play. And Jefferson himself is saying, I want to make sure I am 110% before I step back on that football field, which you can't blame him for doing. And then Hollywood Brown will be our next wide receiver at 36. Obviously, in the case of Hollywood Brown, I mean, you are going to end up getting Kyler Murray back in. And I'm excited about Kyler. I think the offense will be significantly better than it was with Clayton Tune. But at the same time with Kyler Murray, the reason you're excited is given the rushing upside and not necessarily the passing volume you may have here. Then Nico Collins will be our next wide receiver at 37. I mean, with Nico Collins, he's been great. He's been the wide receiver one in Houston, and CJ Stroud is obviously phenomenal. Now, if you are looking at the implied team total, you actually have the Houston Texans with the same implied team total as what you have with the Arizona Cardinals. And with Nico Collins over the past month, he's averaged 5 targets per game. So even if he has been great, I do want to be realistic here. He's not getting a ton of volume. Then our next player will be Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers at 38 is a wide receiver that honestly, if we are going through and looking at what we have in that underdog pick'em as well, we're way too high on Jacoby Myers. I mean, Jacoby Myers, I want to say, do not listen to me. You probably do not want to start this guy. His underdog pick'em is at 40.5 receiving yards. So what I would probably do is I'd probably ignore our ranking here, bench Jacoby Myers, and go take the more than 40.5 receiving yards on Underdog Fantasy. It's a very tough matchup against the Jets, as we were already mentioning. Now, dropping down to our next tier, guys, we have Tank Dell. And with Tank Dell here, if you look at the underdog pick'em, it will tell you, yeah, you probably want to start him over Jacoby Myers. He's actually seen the target volume over Nico Collins as of late. Now, of course, we have a little bit of a larger track record with Nico Collins, and Collins has been the better player so far. But, I mean, with the way that things are trending, you could make an argument that sometime soon, Tank Dell will be someone we want over Nico Collins. DeAndre Hopkins will be that guy at 40 with Hopkins. I think he's like a low-end wide receiver too. I mean, a lot of these guys kind of are in a similar range, right? And yeah, hopefully you did sell him after the 3-touchdown game. Christian Kirk will be the next guy. I think Kirk will be higher than this in our rest of season rankings. And same thing with Amari Cooper, right? Both these guys are going to be players that we're usually more excited about. Now, the issue is this is a tough spot when you have Christian Kirk going up against the 49ers and Amari Cooper going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Even though Amari was phenomenal this past week, obviously this Ravens defense is playing as if they're the best defense in the NFL currently. And you have an applied team total from Vegas Sportsbooks, which I want to reiterate, they know significantly more than I do, of 15.5 points for the Cleveland Browns this week. Now, Alexander Madison will be the next player at 43 with Madison. I want to get confirmation, but I'm kind of assuming that he's going to slide himself into like the Ramondre Stevenson, Rashad White range in a non-PPR format. Now, full PPR league, he's not going to catch the ball as much as those other guys are. But you have no Cam Akers here. So if you have no Cam Akers, I mean, ultimately, this should be a running back that sees pretty much every touch out of the backfield. And Javonte also looks to be someone that is trending in a way where he is the primary back in Denver. The issue is you're going up against the Buffalo Bills. You're 7.5 point dogs. So it's hard to come out here and hard to get excited about a running back in a bad offense that has a tough matchup. And Zay Flowers will be our next wide receiver, and we'll go Calvin Ridley as well. Both wide receivers, very tough matchups against the Browns and the 49ers. I understand maybe you're going to look at this, roll your eyes, go, Mason, I can't start Zay Flowers if you've not seen what Flowers done over the past 2 weeks. Now, I hope you're right. I hope Zay Flowers continues to do nothing because your boy sadly did not draft any Zay Flowers. I didn't draft any Calvin Ridley either. But the reality of the situation is, while they may not be on my fantasy teams, they still have a lot of upside. Flowers still has seen a considerable amount of volume so far this season as well. Now, going over to our next guy, we're going to be looking at Gabe Davis here at 47. With Gabe Davis, I want to be very boring and just repeat what we say every week. You have no idea when he is going to do anything. He has the lowest floor of anybody on this list and one of the highest ceilings, which makes it damn near impossible to start him. If people are viewing him as a locked and loaded wide receiver 2 rest of season, probably a good spot to sell high after a big week. Whereas if he's coming off a complete dud and people are saying that this guy is not startable, I just want to reiterate, he does have a lot of upside. He is someone that can go out there and can crush if things go in his favor. Now, our next 2 players will be Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba. They actually have phenomenal matchups, right? So if you wanted to go through and if you wanted to rank these players higher than this, I would be completely fine with it. My issue with that may just end up being they're going to eat into each other. While I like the long-term upside of Jackson Smith-Njigba, it's not like he is someone that we can for sure say is startable right now, even if he did get the volume this past week. I do hope it continues to trend in that direction, though. Then John Dodson will be that next player at 50. If you are looking at John Dodson, this is a wide receiver that has been getting there over the past 2 weeks with the Curtis Samuel injury. And if Sam Howell continues to be a top 5-ish quarterback in the NFL with this passing volume, he's going to be someone that probably continues to crush. Now, my question is, does Sam Howell continue to be that player? I just simply don't know. It looks like it probably could very easily happen. And then Gus Edwards, Jerome Ford will be our next 2 backs. With these guys, I do think that they are going to be touchdown dependent. I would be more willing to bet that you get a touchdown from Gus Edwards, who has scored 6 touchdowns over the past 3 weeks so far this season, ladies and gentlemen. But ultimately, it'll be a very low-scoring game environment. They're both in running back by committees at the same time. So if it's a low-scoring environment and they're in running back by committees, I don't necessarily know how excited we are about it. But I think that's all we have for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you have not done so already, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you wanted to check out any of those pick'ems, I'd say one that I know y'all are going to be very interested in would be Jacoby Myers for more than 40.5 receiving yards. I would caution you, really tough matchup against the Jets. But yeah, you can find that link in the description, in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK, 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And you can hop into some drafts with us as we get them in the live stream every single night. But thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. I really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day and really hope we get to see you in the live stream later tonight.